The South China Sea has become a boiling cauldron of U.S.-China tensions, with U.S. naval patrols frequently clashing with China's aggressive fleet. Provocations from Chinese carriers and submarines have pushed tensions to the brink. In 2025, a ferocious naval battle in the South China Sea saw the U.S. Navy obliterate China's war fleet in flames, triggering a chain of events that shocked the world. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a maritime provocation to an outcome that left everyone reeling. On a sweltering afternoon in 2025, the South China Sea near the Spratly Islands simmered with danger. China's Liaoning carrier, flanked by J-15 fighters, suddenly encircled the USS Ronald Reagan, a U.S. carrier on a freedom of navigation mission. The Chinese carrier broadcast warnings, demanding Reagan's departure from waters Beijing claimed as territorial. Reagan held course, radar sweeping relentlessly, the atmosphere electric. Abruptly, a J-15 dove low, dropping an incendiary bomb near Reagan, igniting a fiery explosion on the water's surface. Alarms blared, black smoke billowed, transforming the Spratlys into a powder keg ready to erupt with devastating force. The provocation ignited a ferocious naval battle. F-18 jets roared from Reagan, engaging Chinese J-15s in a whirlwind dogfight over the South China Sea. Missiles streaked across the sky, a J-15 exploding in a fireball that lit up the horizon. U.S. destroyers fired cruise missiles into the Liaoning, punching through its deck and sparking raging fires. China's fleet retaliated with anti-ship missiles, one striking a U.S. escort ship, sending a towering geyser skyward and rocking the vessel. Smoke and flames spread, relentless explosions churning the sea, turning the South China Sea into a blazing battlefield where every wave hid death. The conflict surged into space with terrifying speed. China deployed jamming satellites, disrupting Reagan's aircraft controls. The U.S. countered with anti-satellite weapons, obliterating a Chinese satellite, sending orbital debris raining like a meteor shower. In the skies, combat drones from both sides collided, exploding in fireballs that illuminated the night. Chinese hypersonic missiles targeted Reagan, but U.S. laser defenses vaporized them in blinding flashes. The war expanded as U.S. allies joined, turning the South China Sea into a multinational flashpoint where missiles and black smoke choked everything. The U.S. launched a full-scale assault, unleashing cruise missiles from submarines to annihilate China's fleet in a rain of fire. Chinese carriers and destroyers sank, their decks erupting in colossal fireballs. China's defenses crumbled under the onslaught, debris flying as command centers vanished. The global economy reeled as oil prices soared, South China Sea shipping routes stalled. Satellite imagery showed vast seas shrouded in smoke and flame, marking an unprecedented phase of warfare without mercy. The battle's fallout triggered an unexpected superstorm in the South China Sea, as explosions altered weather patterns, spawning a massive tropical cyclone with 300-kilometer winds. The storm swept through both surviving fleets, sinking damaged ships and flooding coastal China and the Philippines. Neighboring nations scrambled for emergency relief, deploying autonomous robots to clear debris and oil spills. The U.S. and China, facing a shared natural disaster, paused hostilities for joint rescue efforts. But the seas remained littered with wreckage, and insurgent groups exploited the storm to rise. The superstorm temporarily curbed the war, but new tensions and lingering natural threats signaled an unstable future.
Tensions in the South China Sea have simmered for years, with confrontations between U.S. and Chinese warships heating up the region. U.S. freedom of navigation operations frequently spark disputes, while China reinforces its sovereignty claims with provocative actions like water cannons and sonar pings. A collision between a Chinese destroyer and a U.S. naval ship near Haivan Island in 2025 pushed the region to the brink, triggering a chain of events that altered the global balance of power. Below is the account of this conflict, from a minor maritime misstep to its catastrophic global consequences. On a stormy August morning in 2025, the waters around Haivan Island in the South China Sea boiled with tension. A Chinese destroyer shadowed the USS Higgins, an Arleigh Burke-class U.S. destroyer equipped with advanced radar and cruise missiles, during a freedom of navigation operation to assert international rights in the disputed region. The Chinese ship broadcast warnings, demanding the USS Higgins depart, echoing Beijing's sovereignty claims. But the U.S. ship held its course, radars locked on target, the atmosphere electric. Suddenly, the Chinese destroyer veered dangerously close, forcing the Higgins to maneuver evasively. The seas around Hainan Island became a powder keg, poised to ignite. The challenge turned aggressive as the Chinese ship deployed water cannons and sonar pings to disrupt the USS Higgins systems. A miscalculation led to a collision. The Chinese destroyer scraped the Higgins hull, sparking fires on both vessels. Alarms blared and smoke rose over the waves. The Higgins fired warning flares, but China mistook this as hostility, launching anti-ship drones. The U.S. ship activated its close-in defense systems, downing several drones, but surviving missiles shook the sea. The turbulent waters bore witness to relentless explosions, transforming the area around Hainan Island into a blazing battlefield. The conflict spilled into cyberspace and the skies. Viruses targeted the USS Higgins navigation systems, while U.S. countermeasures disrupted the Chinese fleet's radar. In the air, fighter jets from a nearby U.S. carrier clashed with Chinese aircraft in fierce dogfights. Hypersonic missiles streaked toward the Higgins, but its advanced defense systems intercepted most, debris raining into the sea. The war expanded as Allied forces from a neighboring nation joined with patrol boats, turning Hainan Island into a multinational flashpoint where explosions and black smoke shrouded the sky. The conflict escalated beyond control when China launched ballistic missiles at U.S. military bases in the Pacific. U.S. retaliated with a strike targeting 3 covert Chinese nuclear bases in the mainland interior. Stealth cruise missiles launched from U.S. submarines obliterated its facilities, shaking the regional balance of power. Smoke and radioactive dust rose from the destroyed bases, sowing panic in nearby cities. China's allies responded with attacks on U.S. bases in Japan and South Korea, while U.S. carriers deployed defensive formations in the South China Sea. The global economy reeled as maritime trade routes halted, and satellite imagery revealed vast regions engulfed in smoke and dust. The nuclear strike unleashed catastrophic consequences. Radioactive dust from the destroyed bases spread, contaminating water sources and farmland across East Asia. An environmental crisis erupted, forcing neighboring nations to collaborate urgently to contain the disaster. Autonomous robot teams were deployed to clean up radiation, while international relief ships delivered medical supplies and food to affected areas. The U.S. and China, recognizing the cost of the conflict, paused military actions to focus on relief efforts. Yet the battlefield remained littered with debris and wreckage, with insurgent groups exploiting the chaos to rise. The crisis temporarily halted the war, but lingering tensions and the enduring environmental threat signaled an unstable future.
The Caribbean has long been a hotspot for tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela, with military standoffs and oil disputes heating the region. U.S. Navy patrols frequently face provocations from Venezuela, while Venezuela bolsters its air force to assert control. In 2025, a reckless flyby by Venezuelan F-16 jets near a U.S. Navy ship ignited a ferocious conflict, triggering a cascade of events that shook the region. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a daring aerial act to an outcome that stunned the world. On a stormy night in 2025, the Caribbean waters near Venezuela's coast churned with danger. 2 Venezuelan F-16 jets, armed with air-to-ship missiles, swooped low, just hundreds of meters from the USS Farragut, a U.S. destroyer on routine patrol monitoring oil transport routes. The Venezuelan pilots broadcast warnings, demanding the Farragut leave what Caracas claimed as their airspace. The U.S. ship held its course, radar sweeping relentlessly, the atmosphere electric. Suddenly, an F-16 dove at breakneck speed, nearly grazing the ship's deck, rattling the vessel and sparking panic. A warning missile from the F-16 skimmed past, exploding on the sea's surface, sending a towering geyser skyward. Alarms screamed, searchlights pierced the darkness, and the Caribbean became a powder keg ready to erupt. The flyby sparked an immediate response. The USS Farragut activated its air defenses, shooting down a Venezuelan surveillance drone tracking the ship. U.S. F-35 jets from Puerto Rico scrambled, engaging the F-16s in a brutal dogfight over the Caribbean sky. Air-to-air missiles streaked through the night. One F-16 shot down, crashing into the sea in a blazing fireball. Venezuelan warships emerged from the horizon, firing flares and water cannons to intimidate the Farragut. The U.S. deployed attack submarines, launching torpedoes that rocked a Venezuelan ship. Black smoke and flames spread, relentless explosions churning the waters, transforming the region into a chaotic battlefield where every second teetered on disaster. The conflict surged into the electronic realm with lightning speed. Venezuelan electronic warfare units deployed jammers, paralyzing the Farragut's radar and communications. The U.S. retaliated with a massive electronic assault, disabling Venezuela's air control systems in Caracas. U.S. satellite jamming signals scrambled the F-16 fleet, causing some jets to lose navigation and crash into the sea. Meanwhile, U.S. hackers breached Venezuela's military networks, seizing control of coastal missile launchers. In the skies, combat drones from both sides clashed in fiery storms, explosions lighting up the night. The Farragut's laser defense system intercepted most Venezuelan missiles, but debris rained down like a meteor shower, igniting fires across the sea. The war turned the Caribbean into a multi-layered flashpoint where technology and firepower merged in chaos. The conflict erupted when Venezuela, backed by regional allies, launched ballistic missiles at U.S. bases in Colombia and Puerto Rico. The U.S. responded with a lightning strike, using B-21 stealth bombers to demolish Venezuelan military airfields near Caracas. Flames and smoke billowed from the flattened bases, sparking panic across the region. Other Caribbean nations were drawn to the brink, with Colombian and Brazilian warships joining patrols to contain the spread. The regional economy reeled as oil transport routes stalled, tankers trapped in the war zone. Satellite imagery revealed massive fires and black smoke clouds, marking an unprecedented phase of warfare in the Caribbean. The conflict's fallout triggered a Caribbean regional crisis. Disrupted oil routes sent global energy prices soaring, causing fuel shortages in the Americas and Europe. Neighboring nations held emergency summits to halt escalation, deploying relief teams to aid affected cities. Autonomous robots cleaned up debris and oil spills at sea, while international special forces hunted insurgent groups exploiting the chaos to rise. The U.S. and Venezuela, facing economic and international pressure, negotiated a sudden ceasefire. But the Caribbean waters remained littered with wreckage, and regional criminal groups emerged from the turmoil. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but new tensions and persistent threats signaled an unstable future.
Tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela have boiled over oil disputes and military posturing in the Caribbean. U.S. patrols often face Venezuelan provocations, while Venezuela's alliances with global powers heighten the stakes. In 2025, a Venezuelan attack on a U.S. asset ignited a massive U.S. retaliation, reshaping regional dynamics and shocking the world. Below is the account of this confrontation, from a daring provocation to its explosive global fallout. On a sweltering afternoon in 2025, Venezuelan forces launched a surprise assault on a U.S. oil platform off the coast of Guyana, seizing it with commandos dropped from helicopters. The platform erupted in chaos as Venezuelan troops overpowered guards, alarms blaring across the waves. U.S. radar detected the incursion, but Venezuelan fighter jets swooped in, firing warning shots at approaching U.S. patrol boats. The atmosphere crackled with electricity as Venezuelan submarines surfaced, their missiles locked on. The U.S. Navy scrambled, but the bold move turned the Caribbean into a tinderbox, ready to detonate with unimaginable force.
The seizure sparked a furious U.S. response. F-35 jets roared from a carrier strike group, engaging Venezuelan fighters in a whirlwind dogfight over the platform. Missiles streaked through the sky, one Venezuelan jet exploding in a fireball that lit up the horizon. U.S. destroyers closed in, their guns pounding Venezuelan positions, waves churning from the blasts. Venezuelan submarines fired torpedoes, rocking a U.S. frigate and sending plumes of water skyward. Marines rappelled onto the platform, reclaiming it in brutal close-quarters combat amid gunfire and screams. Smoke billowed as oil slicks caught fire, transforming the sea into a raging inferno where every wave hid death. The conflict surged into cyberspace with blinding speed. Venezuelan hackers crippled U.S. communication networks, disrupting fleet coordination. The U.S. countered, jamming Venezuelan radar and seizing control of their missile systems. In the skies, swarms of drones clashed, exploding in mid-air firestorms that illuminated the panic below. Hypersonic missiles from Venezuelan silos targeted U.S. bases in Puerto Rico, but laser defenses vaporized them in flashes of light. The war expanded as allies scrambled jets, turning the Caribbean into a multinational maelstrom where digital strikes and aerial fury merged in chaos. The escalation peaked when Venezuela launched ballistic missiles at U.S. territories. In retaliation, the U.S. unleashed 1,200 cruise missiles from submarines and bombers, obliterating Venezuelan military installations in just minutes. The barrage turned coastal bases into craters of flame, explosions echoing like thunder across the continent. Venezuelan defenses crumbled under the onslaught, debris flying as command centers vanished in fireballs. Global markets plunged as oil prices skyrocketed, and satellite feeds showed entire regions engulfed in smoke, marking a devastating phase of warfare that left no room for mercy.
The strike's aftermath triggered a regional refugee crisis. Destroyed infrastructure displaced millions, flooding borders with desperate Venezuelans seeking safety in Colombia and Brazil. Camps overflowed, diseases spreading amid chaos as international aid struggled to keep up. The U.S. and Venezuela, facing humanitarian disaster, paused hostilities for emergency relief, but insurgent groups rose, seizing control of lawless zones. Autonomous drones patrolled refugee routes, while relief convoys delivered supplies under fire. The crisis temporarily curbed the war, but swelling tensions and persistent threats signaled an unstable future.